targets, etc. So some unfortunately came here legally as well. And so their intent is there's a multiple terrorist groups supporting Al Qaeda's plot, and they're all running different pieces of themselves for kind of a massive 9/11 style upcoming plot here.
And people, I can hear their voices in my mind saying, how do you know all these things are true? Because this seems like something that our government should be on top of, they should be privy to, and it should be represented, or at least the way that they should be investigating and thwarting. This should be like the number one threat that we should be concerned of. So how do you have this information and know all of these things that don't seem to be public?
Yeah, well, our government does know a lot of these terrorists came in. The unfortunate thing is they don't know the numbers. So when Director Joe Kemp went through the confirmation process in Congress, he gave us some of the numbers. It's not all of them, but he said, hey, we know when we evacuated persons from Afghanistan, 1,400 of them were linked to a terrorist group. He also said we know 600 people came in over the southern border through an ISIS pipeline. So he highlighted 2,000 terrorists, which is a small number, but it's still, he did say that publicly, right? So this is well known. Now, when we talk about some of these Syrian connections, we've already been involved in a plot. So the January 1st New Orleans attack links back to some of these HTS networks. You know, the government kind of made you feel, hey, this was a lone wolf. That's actually not the case. His cell, Shamsuddin Jafar, his name was, he was a former veteran who unfortunately ended up joining ISIS. His cell was led by the ISIS military commission, and the U.S. government did kill the head of that commission. They bombed him just this March, and, you know, he's gone now. The deputy head of that cell, his name's Khalid al-Shami, he is in Giuliani's Ministry of Defense. So think about it. He's basically running a giant unit in their military, be kind of like the head of our PACOM, sent a terrorist out to another country, right? So it's almost like an act of war if you really looked at it. It is directly to his, Defense Department.
Why did them do it? Like, in your opinion, I mean, obviously you don't have brains, but let Giuliani speak in America. Like, does that show that we're weak and we're allowing this to happen, therefore our vulnerabilities to be exploited? Or is there a tactic to it? Or, could we be the CIA track him and bug him, and they're trying to find a way to get him in so we can, thwart his opportunity to do this? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's two pieces. There's a political piece, and then, you're kind of bringing up an operational piece. The political piece is very, very simple. There's a strong effort for kind of a Middle East peace plan, maybe leading into something like a Nobel Peace Prize. And there's a belief they need to bring Giuliani, who's now the president of Syria, since he took over the country with a bunch of terrorists last year. They need him for this peace plan. So that's the political piece. Now, unfortunately, on the operational side, our Department of Defense is allied with Giuliani and is taking out targets for him. Unfortunately, they're selling it to the American people as, hey, we're doing these effective operations against ISIS, and they're not. Just this year, 2 times they said they killed the head of ISIS. He's still alive. So they think they're taking out targets, but they're not. And they fell for the same ruse, unfortunately, in Afghanistan, where we're partnered with the Taliban. So it's we're just watching the exact same thing that happened in Afghanistan happen again.
Do you think it's intentional, or do you think it's incompetence? Like, is the President Trump and our forces, or CIA, and the people that can do all the dirty work and should have technology to understand all of these things, how can we continue to get bamboozled?
I think a little bit hubris. Nobody wants to admit they are falling for terrorist propaganda. I think there's a lot of people in our government, even within our Congress, that wanted to see some sort of peace in Syria. So almost like forcing it, even though he's already committed just this year genocide against Christians, genocide against Alawites. This is a guy who actually is one of the lead people who imprisoned and made all those Yazidi women be ISIS brides, and they raped them, kidnapped them. We saw all of displays where they sold them, right? So yeah, it's like a want for something. Like, everybody wants like these bad guys to become good like understand is terrorists have one goal, and they're never going to be us. And I do think it's a little head in the sand.
Well, I'm gonna switch gears real quick because you seem to be very knowledgeable about America's connections in all these places. You know, I have been a staunch supporter of Israel. Obviously, I'm a big fan of this, and I'm not as back in things that. What's your thoughts on some of that? Because a lot of people complain that we should not be allied with Israel and that they're a negative force to America and all of those things. I mean, somebody who seems to be an expert like you that know a lot about the involvement in Afghanistan. I mean, is there any truth to any of those claims that somehow Israel is not really an ally of America?
Yeah, I really don't think that's the case. I'm obviously anti-terrorist. A lot of that comes in as terrorist propaganda, unfortunately. What is a fact is the planning for October 7th started in March 2022, and actually October 7th wasn't just a Hamas attack. It was planned by Iran, as most people know. Al-Qaeda was involved in the senior leadership of the Taliban. Now, that attack was basically a dress rehearsal for the big one coming to the U.S. homeland. So those terrorists trained in camps with those sleeper cells I told you that came here. So this is like one small piece of the pie. So the way I look at it is, hey, everybody Israel kills in this piece of the pie helps us. They've already killed, I told you how we killed one individual involved in the plot. They killed one of the Iranian brigadier generals involved in the plot here, right? So everyone they kill, as you can imagine, makes us safer because they take out one more person in this pipeline. They took out the whole senior leadership of the Hezbollah Radwan forces. Again, that's very, very crucial. They were actually targeting U.S. interests as well, and they were involved all the way back to our Marine Beirut bombings. So the thing is, Israel has been incredibly effective against terrorists in the last 2 years. As you can imagine, to be effective against terrorists, you have to go a little scorched earth. We saw this in Libya. Terrorists took over the city of Benghazi after we left, okay? So there was a General Haftar. He had to go in and do the same thing. In 2.5 years, he eliminated both Al-Qaeda and ISIS from basically all of East Libya, right? This is how you unfortunately have to do these operations. We don't always have the spine to do it, and that's why we gave it to Taliban back in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, the U.S. doesn't play hardball in this way, but I do think it is effective against this enemy.
I'm glad you said that. I've been getting killed about Israel, and I don't know nothing. You know, I don't know much about the underpinning ideas that some of these people are bringing up. And then again, I had no idea where you stood on that. So, I do respect what you have to say, and I wanted to know is like, what is this? Because I felt, like I said, not as knowledgeable as you, but I felt like that there's a reason why we have a strategic partnership with Israel. Everything I hear Benjamin Netanyahu say seems to be connected to some of the things that you're saying. Like, we have this partnership because they are fighting our enemy in the Middle East, and we give them billions of dollars in aid for military funding, which would make sense that we're using them kind of like almost like proxy to do these wars, and we're funding that. I want to get back to.
Can I bring up one thing about the funding though? So the interesting thing is when we fund our allies, for example, in these cases, a lot of that is the money stays here in the United States. We buy the weapons and we fund them that way. So that's also how we kind of support our own military, right, through these sales to our allies. Because you can imagine, we can't just sell weapons to anybody. We have our own compasses. Some people use these weapons in horrible ways against their own people and for genocide. So we are very particular about our allies and who we give weapons to, but that money really filters mostly into us.
That makes sense. And yeah, a lot of people don't know that. Like they say, we give Israel $3.8 billion a year, but it's like, no, we don't just give them the money and let them go buy military equipment anywhere in the world. They have to come to us to use all of that money with us, or at least in this year, I think the last year they have to use 75%. I think it's going to end up being 100% of that military funding. They have to come through us. And I think it's like a bank account. It's not even like a money given. It's kind of like they have a credit line through things that they, end up using that's our military equipment, which brings the economic, money back to the American, our national security. But I wanted to get to how is this gentleman, Julani, connected to Hamas? Is there a direct connection, or is it a connection through Iran and Syria or something, or is it like a direct connection to the terrorists in Hamas?
Yeah, the best way to put it is the terrorists have joined this council. It's called the United Resistance Council. People call it is the Islamic Army. So it was basically set up by Al-Qaeda, but all these terrorist groups joined and they share resources, money, funding. So like Al-Qaeda is a member of it, Julani's HTS is a member of it, and Hamas is a member of it. So here's a good way to explain how this works, okay? So obviously a bunch of Hamas terrorists got killed. So you have to reconstitute Hamas. How do we do that? We've got to train new members. Where do you train new members? You're not training them in Gaza, you've got to train them in Syria or Afghanistan. So if you train them in Syria, you have to train them in camps owned by Julani and HTS. If you train them in Afghanistan, he has camps there, you can use his camps there, or Al-Qaeda's camps. So you allow HTS into your camps, you train them, you maybe give them money to help them reconstitute, because you're all a part of this council, that you're supporting each other's initiatives, because we all have a shared goal against the United States, Israel, the West, etc. Because they want, in a grouping now that they're starting to begin to form an Islamic caliphate, and they at least in their heads believe that's starting.
So even if Netanyahu and the IDF eliminate Hamas in Gaza, which I don't know how they would know who's Hamas and who's not, because it's not like they wear uniforms or something. But if they believe that they've eliminated them, they haven't really eliminated them, right? Because they can just continue in another path through another country as allied.
Yeah, a really good example is, so prior to October 7th, Hamas did send a bunch of terrorists to Afghanistan to train, and they trained in 6 terrorist camps. Now, because as we said, a lot of Hamas members really have been killed, they are now training in 12 terrorist camps in Afghanistan. So if you kill one Hamas member, you train 2 new ones. So unless they're going to start striking them, they're reconstituting, and that's not happening because the U.S. has stopped the strikes in Afghanistan, then Hamas will just keep reestablishing and growing itself, and then these other groups are obviously supporting this effort. Now remember, this number really doesn't get discussed, but when those terrorists crossed into Israel, the number is somewhere in the 6,000-7,000 range. There weren't 6,000 and 7,000 members of Hamas crossing over. There's people who are like within the Taliban, these Syrian terrorist groups like HTS. We know Libyans who died in October 7th, right? So also they were supplemented even the day of the attacks by other terrorist groups.
That's crazy. What does that look like for America? Because you had mentioned before that they are coordinating terrorist sleeper cells in America, and they want to do an October 7th style attack. What does that look like? I mean, I don't think they could take people hostage like they did on October 7th. Is it just a mass casualty situation, or do they think they're going to take land? You know, they're going to take a small town, or, you know, what do you think that's all about?
So what we've seen, at least with the plotting, I'd say there's 3 pieces. One's a large aviation plot again, and that they're just going to do suicide bombers on planes and drop them down, and that's their mass casualty. The goal is to kill 4,000 people. Then they want something like you said about almost a hostage and hold ground. That seems to be some sort of assault or attack on Washington, D.C., because they want to cripple the federal government's response. And then the last piece, they are going to go into our communities, unfortunately, like it was for October 7th. ISIS is leading that piece, and how they train is in 5 to 10 man kind of urban assault teams, and they're going to attack like churches, supermarkets, hospitals, and they're going to do multiple locations at a time. So it'll be very difficult for law enforcement, and they're also going to either target law enforcement or look like law enforcement to fool civilians, which they also did that during the October 7th attack. So if it doesn't get thwarted, or piece of this doesn't get thwarted, this will obviously
Tell them to bring it.
be probably the biggest attack ever.
Come on, you Muslims, Hamas, ISIS, all you. Bring it. Come here and bring it.
Now, when you talk about the groups, so you know how we said Hamas did October 7th? Well, now I told you all these we do different here because our government can't go after these cells when there are multiple groups. We're not even designed to confront terrorists.
That's crazy. I hope that it doesn't happen. I mean, people, some of these veteran communities are stacked to the gill with guns, so hopefully they can have a reasonable defense. And that's another reason why I think America needs to get their head out of the rear end and understand that we can never give up our arms. Because in a situation like that, you go and invade Canada, I mean, they could take over a lot of real estate before the military can respond.
Yes.
In America, you got to worry about the hillbillies and you got to worry about the rednecks and some people that, former military and police officers that can really put together an assault team themselves and take care of it. So I just wonder what the government is going to do. Do you think that they're going to be successful in this? Or do you think the government is equipped, ready under this administration or possibly the next administration to actually do something like this?
I think we haven't forwarded enough pieces, like 2 senior layers are dead, which is a good thing. I don't think we picked up, though, like the attackers that are here, especially hundreds of them. So unfortunately, in my opinion, we're at a point where plot is so far along. I do think pieces of it are going to happen. I hope the government leans in and at least can affect some parts. Obviously, the aviation piece, right, is the easiest one for the government to stop. So I'd like to see them lean in more. But as you know, our focus is kind of the cartels now, the border. We can reclassify what terrorism is, and we've dropped the ball on Islamic terrorism. So when we say, oh, we arrested 200 terrorists this month, well, those are now, Latin American cartel and gang members. They're not a terrorist from Saudi and Kuwait and Egypt and Jordan like we're going to see in this plot. And so I'm a little concerned that there is hubris that, Al-Qaeda can't pull this off. Bin Laden's sons are his father. And I am worried that we're going to be a little like Israel and downplay and not take serious what's coming. Because Israel never thought Hamas would attack like that. And that's why they were so unprepared when it happened.
Speaking of that, I don't know if you have any insight on this. I mean, Netanyahu's getting a lot of pushback. Even Charlie, rest his soul, had questions about their response. Now, I went to Israel, but we didn't go to West Bank because it was, not the West Bank, we didn't go to Gaza Strip because it's too dangerous. We were on a Christian tour with a church, so they were like, yeah, we're not going down there because there could be live rockets up here at any point. And so, do you think, and it's just a hypothesis, many of us really know, what happened there? Because people are saying that it was 6 hours for them to respond. I don't know if that's like officially respond or I don't know where the people are getting that number from. But it's allegedly it took them way longer than normal to actually respond to the terrorist attack. Was it because they got caught off guard or was it something a little more nefarious?
Yeah, well, the 6 hours is a rumor. That isn't actually true. There are a couple things that affected response. Number one, first off, in that border area, they kind of left technology to run it, right? So technology is going to alert us if there's an encouraging well. Now we have thousands of people coming over. We don't really have bodies on the border anymore because we're using technology. The thing is, those communities near the border had these kind of civilian community watch teams, and they used to actually be better trained and armed, but as they put the technology in, they took a lot of weapons from them and said, you don't really need this anymore. So when the attack happened, they had maybe 5 weapons for a whole community, okay? So that was kind of gone away over time. Then terrorists actually struck first responders in both the first wave and the second wave. So in the first wave, they went straight at police stations and just went straight to the people who would respond to you and kill you. The other part is even smarter. So what they did is they had done surveillance of how first responders are going to leave, like the routes they're going to take. They set up on the routes, and when the first responders left, they ambushed them on the route and killed them. So it really hasn't been put out publicly, but a lot of first responders, military, etc., EMS died early on in the attack because they were initial targets.
I figured that because I saw that even in the death toll number, they were saying that there was IDF soldiers and others involved in a big number. And I think it's important for people to understand. For some reason, Israel is PR is like whoever is doing PR or trying to disseminate information on their behalf is just dropping the ball. You don't hear this publicly. You don't hear anything explained. You don't hear any of the tactics that Hamas use. You don't hear any of the actions of Hamas and that this was a front assault. Like I heard early on that they were planning on hitting them from all sides, but somehow the plan got thwarted. Others backed out and Hamas killing, and then that's how they got overrun. But I don't know if it was true or not. But I heard that they tried to attack from Syria, tried to attack from other places at the same time as this attack. Was that? Do you have any information on that?
So the only thing that really didn't happen, they staged in Syria. So the attack technically was from Syria. That's where the majority of the terrorists staged. Now, the one element that chose not to get involved that would have led to thousands of more deaths was Hezbollah forces that I told you about. So they chose not to get involved. They would have been the northern
Getting those abs.
So it would have been a lot worse
Working
for
on
the
it.
terrorists. We would have now had 9,000 terrorists come over at once. But again, as you can imagine, just in the 6,000 range, there are not governments and communities who can handle that. I mean, can you imagine if even just 6,000 came over the southern border into those border communities, of what would happen?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, one shooter at a school or at some of these places are hard to handle. They can't even contain. It's only have some type of training, tactical clearance that have a plan. I mean, it would be overwhelming. As a former police officer myself, we're not local law enforcement whatsoever. And our SWAT teams are only 30, 40 people at a regional size agency. And, you know, so even the top guys, only 30 or 40 of them, you had 1,000 people at a time mobilizing. And so, look, are you optimistic about the future of America, or are we headed down a path of no return? Meaning that we're going to end up getting taken over by Islamic ideology.
Hell no.
We're going to let anti-Semitism and hatred
That's not gonna happen.
divide us in our country, racism and talks of hatred towards the government. Are we going to just be so splintered that the enemy could infiltrate either, you know, electronics, whether shutting down the grid, the cell phones, are they going to, you know, be able to get at us while we're looking this way on a terrorist attack that you explained before? We're optimistic, like, you know, we're not resolved enough to overcome this.
Yeah, I mean, what I focused on, and I've done this since January, is I'm going to community to community, talking to sheriff's departments, the mayors, etc., governors in some states to be like, hey, you know, if the federal government drops the ball on this, right, it's on the community level. We need to respond. Like you said, a SWAT team, first of all, is going to take 40 minutes to respond. Obviously, you can't do that in this type of attack. So we've at least been trying to talk about resiliency. Let's get ahead of this. Let's get to the post-9/11 mindset. The big negative is the culture of our country, as you know, is not 9/12, right? We're not all going to come together. And that's another thing we've been really trying to inform people. Like, when this happens, a lot of people are actually going to blame the government. And then we're going to become a lot more broken, more division, right? Because you're also not trusting your own party. So I am worried that we're going to have a rough patch if this plot goes through, unfortunately. And I do think our enemies will take advantage of us because we'll be weak in that moment.
It's so sad. It's so sad that this happened. You co-authored Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy.
Something so far outside what you thought was real that it just breaks a part of your brain. Something you can't talk about, not really, because who the hell would believe you? Yeah, I live with that every single day, every night when I close my eyes. My name's Noah Price. Chief Petty Officer Noah Price, U.S. Navy SEALs, 6. Did my time, saw things, did things. Stuff you see in the news, stuff you definitely don't. Thought I'd seen the ragged edge of what humans and the world could throw at you. Afghanistan, Iraq, Horn of Africa, unnamed places doing unnamed jobs. You get used to the adrenaline, the fear, the grit. You learn to trust your training, your gear, and the guys next to you. Above all, you trust reality. The solid, dependable physics of bullets and bodies and gravity. Until that one time. Until North Carolina. Sounds stupid, right? Carolina. Not exactly a war zone. We were stateside, supposed to be a training hub mixed with something sensitive. That's how they pitched it. Happened about 5 years back, maybe 6 now. Time gets fuzzy around the edges of this memory, like my brain's trying to protect itself by blurring it. They pulled 4 of us from different platoons. Me, Carter Davis, our comms guy, sharp as a tack, always knew 3 ways out of any situation. Ethan Wright, heavy weapons, built like a brick shithouse. Quiet guy, but you wanted him watching your back when things went loud. And James Lee, our medic, cool under pressure. Seen him patch guys up in the middle of firefights that would make your hair stand on end. Solid guys, all tier 1 operators. The best. The briefing wasn't at DevGRO or Bragg. No, it was way off the grid. A nondescript building that probably didn't exist on any official maps, somewhere deep in Virginia. No uniforms in sight, just guys in suits that cost more than my car. The main briefer, a guy named Alexander Williams according to his temporary badge. Probably fake, didn't look military. Didn't look like anything really. One of those government spooks who's trained to be forgettable. He laid it out, sort of. Said there was an ongoing biological survey being conducted by a private research group. Contractor. Read between the lines. Deep in the Pisgah National Forest, North Carolina. Real remote section, rugged terrain. Apparently they'd lost contact with the research team. Not just lost contact, the way Williams described it, they'd vanished. Poof. Gone. Emergency beacon silent, comms dead, everything. We need you to go in, Williams said, his voice flat, emotionless. Assess the situation, locate the researchers or their remains, determine the cause of the communication loss. Standard silver mostly, but it wasn't standard. Not even close. First red flag. The gear wasn't standard issue. Yeah, we had our usual MS, sidearms, comms, med gear. But they also issued us these extras. Heavy gauge thermal imagers, way more advanced than anything we usually carried. Acoustic sensors designed to pick up subsonic frequencies. And the ammo wasn't just standard ball and tracer. They gave us mags loaded with rounds I'd never seen before. Looked like hollow points, but heavier. Maybe jacketed with something exotic. Silver wasn't mentioned, but you get the idea. Williams called them specialized anti-materiel rounds for dense foliage penetration. Bullshit. You don't use anti-materiel rounds for search and rescue. Second red flag, the ROE. Rules of engagement were weird. Usually it's clear-cut, threat identification, escalation of force. This time, Williams was vague. You may encounter unusual indigenous wildlife, he said, and he couldn't quite meet our eyes. Standard procedures apply regarding dangerous fauna, but exercise extreme caution. These researchers were heavily armed and experienced. Whatever stopped them is significant. He paused, then added the kicker. If you encounter any undocumented biological entities, engagement is authorized. Lethal force is authorized. Priority is self-preservation and mission completion. Retrieval of specimens, if feasible, is a secondary objective. Undocumented biological entities. Specimens. What the hell were we walking into? Carter tried to press him. Sir, can you clarify undocumented biological entities? Are we talking bears, cougars, something else? Williams just gave this tight little smile that didn't reach his eyes. Chief Davis, your team is being deployed because you are adaptable and trained to handle unforeseen threats. Follow the intel, trust your training. Eliminate any significant threat to your team or the mission. Questions? We had a million questions, but we knew better than to ask. This had Black Op written all over it, something someone high up wanted handled quietly and permanently. The money was good, hazard pay on top of hazard pay, plus a completion bonus that was frankly ridiculous. Enough to make you ignore the alarm bells ringing in your head. Third red flag, the insertion. No driving in, no hiking from a trailhead. We were flown in by an unmarked black MH-60. Not yet insertion, fast roping into a tiny clearing barely big enough for the bird to hover over, miles from anywhere. The moment our boots hit the ground and the chopper peeled off, the silence crashed down. You know that backwoods silence, where it's so quiet it rings in your ears? This was different. It felt dead. No insects, no birds, not even wind rustling the leaves, even though we were high up, maybe 4,000 feet. Just absolute suffocating silence. We moved out fast using the advanced thermals. Standard diamond formation, me and Paul. The forest was thick, old growth. Massive trees, rhododendron thickets so dense you had to push through them. The ground was soft, covered in decades of leaf litter, which should have been. But that dead silence made every snap of a twig sound like a gunshot. The thermals were almost too good. They picked up every squirrel, every raccoon, sniffing the woods and shifting heat signatures. But there were bright spots too. Patches where the temperature seemed unnaturally low and colder than the surrounding air. And sometimes, just at the edge of the thermal range, Carter would report fleeting signatures. Too big for deer, wrong shaped for bear. There 1 second, gone the next. Like ghosts in the machine.
My old phone carrier was reaching their hand into my wallet and just helping themselves. I like having no surprises when it comes to my cell phone bill. And with Spectrum, it's safe.
We reached the researcher's last known position. GPS coordinates provided by Williams, around 03000. It wasn't a camp. It was a goddamn massacre site. Tents shredded like tissue paper. High-tech equipment smashed, optics cracked, solar panels bent in half. And blood. But a lot. Disturbingly little, actually. But definitely blood spattered on tree trunks, soaked into the leaf litter. We swept the area. No bodies. No drag marks. Nothing to indicate where the researchers had gone. It was like they just evaporated. Except for the footprints. They were everywhere around the destroyed camp. Huge prints, deep into the soil. Carter measured one, 19 inches long, 8 inches wide, 5 tons. Their arch looked almost human. Except no human is that big or leaves prints that deep. Ethan, our quiet giant, knelt by one print, his face grim. Senior chief, he muttered, look at this. Claw marks. Long, sharp claws like a bear, but shorter, thicker, like something designed for gripping rock or tearing flesh. They were at the tip of each toe impression. We followed the tracks leading away from the camp. There were multiple sets, maybe 3 or 4 individuals moving with massive strides. We didn't follow any trail, they just moved straight through the undergrowth. Small trees were snapped off at the base, thick branches broken 8-9 feet off the ground. Whatever these things were, they were incredibly strong and didn't give a damn about moving quietly. The tracks led us deeper into a ravine, following a creek bed choked with fallen logs and boulders. It was slow going, treacherous footing in the dark, even with NVGs and thermals. The dead silence persisted, broken only by the gurgle of the creek and our own breathing. It felt wrong, predatory, like the woods themselves were holding their breath, waiting. We'd been moving for maybe an hour when Carter held up a fist. Halt. He pointed to his thermal display, got movement, multiple contacts, converging on our position. We melted into the shadows, taking up defensive positions behind massive boulders along the creek. Weapons ready, safety's off. I scanned with my own thermal. Carter was right. 3, no, 4 large heat signatures moving through the trees on both sides of the ravine. Moving fast, moving tactically. They weren't crashing through the woods now. They were using the terrain, moving from tree to tree, staying low. Coordinated, like they knew we were here. Like they'd been waiting for us. Then the sound started. You ever heard rocks being scraped together? To pebbles, but big rocks, like boulders grating against each other. It was coming from ahead of us down the ravine. Rhythmic scraping, echoing off the rock walls. It set my teeth on edge. James, our medic, whispered over the phones, his voice tight. What the hell is that? Don't know, I replied, keeping my voice low. Stay frosty, eyes open. The screaming stopped, and the silence that followed was even worse. We waited. Maybe 5 minutes passed. Nothing. Just the creek, the cold air, the pounding of my own heart. Maybe it was just rocks falling, Ethan suggested, his voice barely audible. Before I could answer, something exploded out of the darkness right in front of us. It wasn't a charge like an animal, it was an ambush. One of those things, maybe 8 feet tall, maybe more, launched itself from behind a boulder not 30 yards away. It moved impossibly fast, covering the distance in seconds. It wasn't just big, it was built. Shoulders like a damn gorilla, arms rocks ending in those clawed hands, covered in dark matted hair that seemed to swirl in the dim light. Its face, God, the face, heavy brow ridge, flat nose, huge jaw filled with teeth that weren't designed for chewing berries. But the eyes, they were intelligent, filled with a terrifying cold intelligence and rage, pure absolute rage. We opened up, all four of us. The sound of our MFs on full auto ripped through the silence, deafening in the narrow ravine. We were pouring rounds into it, those specialized rounds Williams had given us, hitting center mass. I saw the impact, saw chunks of fur and flesh fly off. It barely slowed down. It hit Ethan first. He was the biggest of us, but the creature swatted him aside like a fly. I heard his body hit the rocks, heard the sickening crack. Then it was on Carter. Carter got his sidearm out, firing point blank into its face. The thing roared, a sound that wasn't animal or human, a sound that ripped right through your soul. It grabbed Carter by his tack vest and just threw him backwards, maybe 20 feet into the creek. James and I were still firing, backing up, trying to create distance. The thing turned toward us, ignoring the rounds still slamming into its chest and shoulders. Blood was pouring from multiple wounds, dark and thick in our NVGs, but it just kept coming. I switched tactics, aimed for the head, put 3 rounds right into its face for maybe 10 yards. It staggered back, roaring again, shaking its massive head. One eye was gone, just a bloody ruin. But it wasn't dead. It wasn't even close to being down. It lunged for James. James, quick as lightning, sidestepped and jammed his combat knife deep into its thigh. The creature bellowed, swiped at it. James dodged back, but not fast enough. Those claws raked across his side, tearing through his gear and flesh like paper. He went down, screaming. Now it was just me. I was out of my primary mag, dropping and slamming a fresh one in. The creature turned, its one good eye fixing on me. And it smiled. I swear to God, it smiled. A horrifying rictus showing those massive teeth. It took a step toward me. I raised my rifle, sighted on its remaining eye. This was it. One shot.
Okay, I have a confession. My husband just tried this new 87-cent generic Viagra from Friday Plans, and it's changed everything for us. When he told me about it, I was worried about a scam. But it worked in 30 minutes. Even
Then, from the darkness behind it, another sound. A high-pitched shriek, almost like a bird of prey, but deeper, more powerful. The creature attacking us froze, its head snapped out, listening. It let out a low growl in response. And then, chaos erupted on the slopes above us. More shrieks, roars, the unmistakable sound of heavy bodies crashing through the trees, gunfire. Not ours, different weapons, heavier caliber, maybe 308s or even 50 cals. And explosions, small ones, like grenades. The creature facing me seemed confused for a second, then angry. It let out another roar, not at me, but toward the fighting up on the ridge. Then it did something I never expected. It turned and ran, not away from me, but towards the sounds of the battle, disappearing into the darkness up the slope. I stood there, shaking, trying to process what the hell had just happened. Who was shooting? Who were they fighting? And why did that thing run towards the gunfire? My comms crackled. It was Carter. Noah, you there? James is hit bad. Ethan's gone. Snapped his neck. His voice was ragged. Copy. I managed. My own voice hoarse. Moving to James. What the hell is going on out there? Don't know, Carter gasped. Sounds like a damn war zone. Maybe backup? Backup? Williams hadn't said anything about backup. This whole op felt wrong, dirtier by the second. I scrambled over to James. He was conscious, barely, bleeding heavily from the wounds on his side. The claws had torn deep. Hang on, James, I said, pulling out my IFAK. Hang on. Carter limped over, favoring his leg where it hit the rocks. We gotta move, Noah. Whatever that thing was, it ran towards the fight. And I don't think whoever's it there is friendly. He was right. The gunfire was sporadic now, but the explosions continued. And the screams, those inhuman roars and shrieks were still echoing through the ravine. It sounded like a pack of demons fighting. We got James stabilized as best we could. Pressure bandages, tourniquet just in case. He was losing consciousness. Carter took his legs, I took his shoulders. We started moving, downstream this time, away from the fighting, away from the destroyed camp, just trying to put distance between us and this nightmare. Moving James was brutal. He was dead weight, and the terrain was a killer. Slippery rocks, fallen logs, thick mud. Every step was agony. Carter Carter was hurting too. I could see him gritting his teeth against the pain in his leg. The sounds of the pain faded by replaced once again by that unnerving dead silence. We moved for maybe 2 hours, pushing ourselves beyond exhaustion. James was fading fast. His breathing was shallow. We found a slightly sheltered spot under a rock overhang barely big enough for the 3 of us. We laid James down, covered him with emergency blankets. Carter checked his vitals. He's hypothermic, Noah, losing too much blood. If we don't get him out soon, he didn't need to finish. We tried the comms again. Nothing. Just static. The advanced gear Williams had given us was useless down here. Okay, I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. New plan. We stay here. Keep James warm. At first light, I go for help. Follow the creek downstream, has to lead somewhere. Carter nodded grimly. What about them? We post watch, I said. One sleeps, one watches. We got enough ammo left for one more fight, maybe. It was the longest night of my life. Longer than any night in Afghanistan, longer than any training evolution. Carter took first watch while I huddled next to James, trying to share body heat, listening to his ragged breathing, listening to the suffocating silence of the forest. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every distant snap of a twig made my heart leap. I kept seeing that face, those intelligent, rage-filled eyes. Kept hearing that soul-shredding roar. When it was my turn to watch, I sat with my back against the rock, rifle across my lap, scanning the darkness. The creek gurgled nearby, the only sound in the dead world. Sometime before dawn, I saw movement across the creek. Just a flicker at first, then a solid shape detaching itself from the shadows. It was one of them. Standing on the opposite bank, maybe 40 yards away, perfectly still, watching us. I raised my rifle slowly, sighted on it. It didn't move, didn't react, just stood there. It wasn't the one we fought. This one was slightly smaller, maybe female. Hard to tell in the dark, but the shape was unmistakable. It stood there for maybe 10 minutes, just watching. Then as slowly as it appeared, it melted back into the trees. It hadn't threatened us, hadn't made a sound. It was just observing, scouting, making sure we were still there. I didn't know, but it was clear we weren't alone. First light was creeping into the ravine when Carter woke me. Noah, listen. I strained my ears. Faintly, very faintly, I heard it. The unmistakable whomp, whomp, whomp of a helicopter. Far off, but getting closer. Hope surged through me so strong it almost hurt. Backup, extraction, or something else. Pop smoke? Carter asked, already reaching for a signal grenade. Wait, I said. Let's see who it is first. My gut was screaming caution. Nothing about this mission had been straightforward. The helicopter came into view, following the ravine upstream. It wasn't the black bird that dropped us off. This was an Army green Huey, older model, no markings. It flew low, rotor kicking up spray from the creek. It passed right over us without slowing down, heading towards the area where we heard the fighting. They didn't see us, Carter said, frustrated. Maybe they weren't looking for us, I replied grimly. We waited. 10 minutes later, the Huey came back, flying faster this time. It didn't stop, didn't circle, just flew straight out of the ravine and disappeared over the ridge. Okay, I said. Time for plan B. I'm hiking out, you stay with James, keep him alive. No, wait. Carter grabbed my arm. Look. He pointed downstream. Maybe half a mile away where the ravine widened slightly, something was moving through the trees. Figures. Human figures. At least a dozen of them, moving in tactical formation. Wearing camo, carrying weapons. Rescue team, Carter whispered. Don't think so, I said. Their gear looked wrong. Too heavy, too specialized. And they weren't moving like a rescue team. They were moving like hunters, sweeping the area, checking tracks, moving with a purpose that felt ominous. They were heading our way. Shit, Carter breathed. Who the hell are these guys? Don't know, I said. But I don't think they're here to help us. Williams' words came back to me. Classified. Serious consequences. These guys weren't park rangers or National Guard. This was something else. Someone cleaning up a mess. Okay, I said, thinking fast. can't stay here. They'll find us. We gotta move James. Where? Carter asked desperately. We can barely lift him. I looked across the creek, toward the dense forest where the creature had disappeared just hours before. Up, I said. Into the trees. Maybe they won't follow us off the creek. It was insane. Moving a critically wounded man uphill through dense forest while being hunted by unknown hostiles. But it was our only chance. Somehow, we did it. Fueled by adrenaline and desperation, we dragged and carried James up the steep slope, moving maybe 50 yards into the thick rhododendrons before collapsing, hidden from view of the creek below. We watched as the strange team swept past our hiding spot. They paused where we'd sheltered, examined the ground, then continued upstream, heading towards the site of the firefight. They weren't looking for survivors. They were tracking the creatures. We stayed hidden for another hour, listening. We heard distant shouts, then a burst of automatic gunfire, followed by silence. We didn't know what it meant, but we weren't waiting around to find out. Okay, I whispered to Carter. We move parallel to the creek downstream. Stay off the main bed. If we can make it a few miles, maybe we can find a logging road, get out of this hot zone. We moved slowly, painstakingly, carrying James between us. He was barely breathing now. Every 100 yards felt like a mile. The forest was silent again, but it didn't feel dead anymore. It felt watchful, like something was letting us leave. We'd gone maybe a mile when we rolled into a small clearing. We saw it. Right near us, ferns, was the body of one of the hunters who had swept past us. Throat torn out, weapon discarded nearby, no sign. And pinned to his chest by a sharpened stick was a piece of bark. Scratched onto it, crude but unmistakable, was one of the symbols I'd seen carved into the rocks near the traps. A message, a warning. We didn't stop, didn't pause. We moment to hear footsteps behind us as
How do I
those
stop this
massive
thing?
shapes step out of the trees. Nothing came. It was like we'd crossed some invisible boundary, left their territory, and they were letting us go. Late afternoon, we heard a truck, an old pickup bouncing down the rutted road. We flagged it down. An old-timer, looked like a local hunter or logger. He took one look at James, at us, and didn't ask questions. Just helped us load James into the bed and drove like hell towards the nearest town. James made it. Barely. Lost